And that's Ken Kraetzer for CaMMVets Media. We cover cadets, midshipmen, the military, and veterans proudly since 2008. I apologize, we've been off the air for a couple of weeks uh, with personal situation many of you are aware of, and appreciate all your support. But we have Jack McGuirk, our colleague, from 15 years doing this show on WVOX in New Rochelle. Now we're live on YouTube and other channels. Jack, how are you?
I'm doing pretty well. How are you?
Good, good. Glad to be back doing some talks with you. And since we spoke last, the conflict in Gaza between Israel and Hamas is just growing more intense. What do you see happening in this conflict?
Well, on Sunday, the on the ground, the Israeli military said it was carrying out a significant strike on Gaza. This was Sunday evening, and they said they opened up a 4-hour evacuation window for civilians to get out of there. But they are continuing to strike on Gaza. And one of the interesting stories happening there is the U.S. naval presence in the Middle East. You have the USS Gerald Ford Carrier Strike Group already there in the Mediterranean. The USS Eisenhower Carrier Strike Group just arrived actually there. They're in the Red Sea. And in a pretty rare announcement, the U.S.
So
military
the
said,
Eisenhower Task Group is in the Red Sea,
Red Sea, yeah,
and who else? Which other carrier? The Ford was the
the
first
Ford.
on the scene in the Eastern Mediterranean.
Yes, yeah.
And now, is there a third carrier group approaching?
Not a third, but a rare announcement. The U.S. military said a guided missile submarine has arrived in the Middle East. Now, this is an Ohio class guided missile submarine. There are a total of 18 Ohio class submarines in the fleet. Only 4 of them are guided missile submarines outfitted with 154 Tomahawk missiles. And usually, it's very unusual for the military to announce where those submarines are going to be. They usually keep that, very hush hush. But they did,
That's being a deterrent.
yeah. So they did make the announcement that this guided missile Ohio class submarine has arrived in the Middle East as well. So
With
a lot.
154 Tomahawk missiles, that's a deterrent to Iran and some other groups from getting involved.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, a lot of naval power there in the Middle East, in the U.S. And it was last week an interesting story. One of the ships there, Navy destroyer, the USS Carney, which is in the Northern Red Sea, intercepted 3 land attack cruise missiles and several drones that were launched by the Houthi forces in Yemen. And the action by the Carney potentially represented the first shots by the U.S. military in defense of Israel in this conflict. Brigadier General Pat Ryder, Pentagon press secretary, told reporters that the missiles were potentially headed towards Israel, but said the U.S. hasn't finished its assessment of what they were targeting. And a U.S. official said they don't believe the missiles, which were shot down over water, were aimed at the U.S. warships. But an array of other drone attacks over the past 3 days did target U.S. bases. I'll get into that. But that was an interesting story. The USS Carney shooting down these missiles and drones over the Red Sea.
Well, that's going to be, we see in Ukraine and here is use of drones and being able to defend against them, shoot them down. And the concern now is these swarms of drones
Uh-huh.
and drones that approach a target from multiple sides simultaneously,
Mm-hmm.
being very hard to defend against.
Yeah.
Especially a destroyer like the Carney. It's a ship we see at New York City Fleet Week quite often.
Yep.
But that's where it's at in defense is drones and defending against them, and that's really where the state of the art is in military conflict right now.
Indeed. And as I mentioned, there were some drone strikes on U.S. bases in the Middle East. And in response to that, U.S. fighter jets launched airstrikes on Friday on 2 locations in eastern Syria linked to Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps in retaliation for those drone and missile attacks against U.S. bases. And the U.S. wants to hit Iranian-based groups suspected of targeting the U.S. as strongly as possible to deter future aggression, possibly fueled by Israel's war against Hamas. Um, And
Yeah, I think that's where everybody's concerned about how this war could expand out with Iran, people, and the backing of Russia and China. There seems to be, there's obviously support for the PLO, and some support for Hamas. The question is whether people differentiate the Palestine people, who everyone wants to see kept safe amidst this terrible conflict that was brought on by the attack of Hamas on Israel, killing nearly 1,500 innocent Israelis. So, this is one of those that the United States, and I would say the State Department, is trying to keep outside forces from getting involved, such as Iran, such as Russia, and even China. I mean, if China decided to take a side with Palestine or Hamas, that would really be would be extraordinary escalation of this conflict. And nobody quite knows what it's going to end. What does it mean to defeat Hamas entirely? And is there a chance of a settlement? Probably not. And then you have Hamas dug into these tunnels and underground complexes that are amazing that they were able to build, but giving them a defensive capability. And so we'll be monitoring that. What do you see happening? What's the latest happening in Ukraine?
In Ukraine, interesting story. The Russian military said a Ukrainian missile strike on a shipyard in Crimea damaged a Russian ship. Now, the Russian Defense Ministry said over the weekend on Saturday that Ukrainian forces fired 15 cruise missiles, 13 at the Zaliv shipyard in Kerch, which is on the eastern part of the Crimean Peninsula. 13 of those missiles were shot down, but others hit the shipyard and damaged the vessel. In a statement from the ministry, they didn't give any details about that, but the Ukrainian Air Force's commander, Mykola Oleshuk, said that the attack carried out by Ukrainian tactical aviation was they hit one of the most modern ships of Russia's Black Sea Fleet at the shipyard with it's a carrier of the caliber cruise missiles. So big missile strike from the Ukrainians on the Russian shipyard hitting a ship there.
Well, war seems to be, again, going back and forth. The Ukrainians now have the M1A1 Abrams tanks that the United States provided, and that should help them defensively. The question is allow them to move forward. We're getting down to the end of the fighting season, as it's known, as we're into November. We'll see how the conflict runs during the winter, whether either side will try to have an offensive or whether they'll wait for the spring to try to carry out something major. I kind of think the Ukrainians need to keep the pressure on the Russians and not back off over the winter, find out what it takes, get the 10th Mountain Division advisors in on how to conduct winter weather warfare and keep moving forward. So, Jack, good reports. Anything else on your list?
Yeah, a couple things. First of all, back here in the States, Admiral Lisa Franchetti, sworn in as 33rd Chief of Naval Operations on Thursday last week. Pentagon, the ceremony followed her confirmation, 95-1 vote in the Senate confirming her. She had been performing the duties of the CNO while waiting for her confirmation. She will be the first woman to serve as head of the Navy and the first female member of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Career surface warfare officer who served primarily on destroyers, and she has served as the VCNO since 2022. First commissioned into the Navy in 1985 through the Naval Reserve Officer Training Corps at Northwestern University. In addition to that, the Senate confirmed Lieutenant General Christopher Mahoney to be the Assistant Commandant of the Marine Corps and General David Albin to serve as next Chief of Staff to the Air Force. Now, Mahoney is a native of Massachusetts and graduated from the College of the Holy Cross. Career aviator, graduating from Naval Fighter Weapons School, also called Top Gun. He served in commanding general for the 3rd Marine Aircraft Wing, deputy commander for U.S. Forces Japan, and director of strategy and plans at headquarters Marine Corps, and deputy commander of the Marine Forces Pacific. So congratulations to Lieutenant General Christopher Mahoney and Admiral Franchetti.
Yeah, I met Admiral Franchetti this spring at the Navy League of the United States Conference in Washington. Very distinguished. It wasn't clear at that point if she would become the CNO or another admiral that was well thought of, who was actually featured on the 60 Minutes episode. A lot of people in the Navy told me that admiral was going to get it, but the Biden administration went for the first woman CNO, Admiral Franchetti. Navy League in New York has its big dinner next Thursday night at the Plaza Hotel. And should be a terrific event. They will have a number of distinguished speakers. We're going to talk to Frank Russo, the captain of former Navy captain, the commander, president of the Navy League of the U.S. This week, and promoting his big dinner next week in New York City. So, Jack, are you have anything else? You're going to talk football? I'll give you a minute to talk football.
Yeah, I have a couple of college sports stories. We'll start off before we get into football. A quick one, college basketball, and that is sad news that legendary basketball coach Bobby Knight passes away at the age of 83. Of course, became the youngest coach in Division I school in 1965 when he broke in at Army up at West Point at the age of 24. But then, of course, he had a long career coaching at Indiana, winning a school record 661 games. Made it to the NCAA tournament 24 times. In 29 seasons. I think he had 3 championships, NCAA championships. So sad news there. And then speaking of college
people forget
football,
that he started at West Point.
He coached Mike Krzyzewski at West Point too. And Navy over the weekend, they lost to Temple. It was a 32-18 win for Temple. Temple quarterback E.J. Warner threw for 402 yards, 4 touchdowns in that game. Xavier Arline had a touchdown pass, a 24-yard touchdown pass to Eli Heidenreich for Navy. Arline finished the day with 97 yards rushing, 30 carries, completing 6 of 14 pass attempts for 124 yards and a touchdown. But ultimately, a tough loss there for Navy. And they're going to be hosting University of Alabama Birmingham, on Saturday this weekend. But big news in college football, of course, is Army with that huge win over Air Force over the weekend in Denver, 23-3. Stunning game. Air Force going into the game had like the best rushing offense in football, in college football, and Army defense did a great job. 6 forced turnovers in the game. By Army defense. So a great win for Army there.
Yeah, I was out at the game in Denver. I actually got a chance on Friday to go to Army's practice at the University of Colorado, which was visited by Deion Sanders, the coach of the Buffaloes. And, it was a beautiful day. I mean, in Denver for the game. 60, it was in at least the 60s, maybe it reached 70. And 50,000, 52,000 at the game. And I want to say thank you to all the folks who came over and gave me an expression of support. I appreciated that from the superintendent on down. Actually, with about a minute before the game started, Mike Vitti runs over, the offensive line coach, gives me a hug. 60 seconds before the game's going to start. And but it's all about the players and what they did, and the Army offense led by quarterback Bryson Daly. Bryson on the first drive ran a couple of plays in, 62 yards he ran for a touchdown, had a big hole open up by the offensive line. Then the Army defense stuffed the Air Force on its first drive on a 4th and 1 at the Air Force 35, took over the ball, and Army got a field goal. So it was up 10-0, barely 5 minutes into the game. And then Air Force got the ball again. I think they fumbled that the next possession. Army went down for its second score by Bryson Daly. And then, as you said, Jack, the turnovers mounted for Air Force, and Army was able to take advantage of them. 3 first-half field goals by Quinn Moretsky. And not chip shots. They were 45, 40, and 38.
Mm.
But what, I said, I was on the media call with Coach Munkin today, and I brought up, the Zach Larrier, the Air Force quarterback, 9 of 22 and 2 interceptions for 93 yards and 2 sacks. He had a terrible day. He was overthrowing receivers who were wide open. Air Force could have gotten back in the game if they just had connected on their passes when they had opportunities. And so the Army defense really put pressure on. I thought that was a big factor in the game. And then, as Coach Munkin said, they were able to play toe-to-toe, rock'em sock'em football in the second half, no scoring. And Army came away with a really memorable win.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, the element of importance of this is it was a Commander-in-Chief trophy game, and now since Air Force is 1-1 on it, and they did not win it at the game, Army has a chance to win the Commander-in-Chief trophy with a win over Navy in December in Foxborough, which for them it salvaged the season entirely. Winning the Commander-in-Chief trophy would be their 4th time in since under the Jeff Munkin era, and Navy struggling, as you pointed out. So we could see Army coming away. Well, we'll see. They got to play the game, and boy, Navy's going to want to keep Army from getting it. But it's going to create a lot of excitement at that game in Foxborough in second Saturday of December. So what do you think watching the game? You have a different vantage point. What did you see Army doing that was different than they've been doing the prior 5 weeks?
The defense was playing great. I was stunned. I thought Air Force is going to play better after the previous week or previous couple of weeks in the Air Force Navy game. Air Force just dominated Navy in that game. But getting back to this one, Army, they just ran the ball well. They made some passes. I think I just kept wondering about Army made some changes to their offense with respect to the new blocking rules. And maybe Air Force, they seem to just stick with what they what they're good at with the triple option and have played great the rest of the previous 8 games in the season. I'm wondering if this new offense by Army sort of caught Air Force off guard a little bit, and then their Air Force triple option offense, the Army defense was ready for it. They were able to figure it out pretty well. So it's a great game for Army.
Yeah, I think the offensive line played real well. Defensive line, linebackers played well. They were able to, Quinn Hammond had a terrific game. The safety, just looking at what Hammond did, 6 tackles, 1 sack, 2 tackles for loss on the game. Kyle Lewis had a tackle for loss. 6 tackles for loss of 32 yards by Army. That's a lot of pressure to bear, and 2 sacks, one by Leo Lowen and one by Quinn Hammonds. And then throwing a couple of 2 interceptions by Bo Nicholas Paul. And, and you got quite a win for Army. Well, we'll talk about that. We have our Army football huddle tonight, but Army will host Holy Cross. I was having quite a season. I didn't realize this. 6-3 on the year. They've got wins. They played BC very close. They've got wins at Yale, Colgate, Bucknell, and Fordham. Always good to beat Fordham.
Fordham was a close one. High-scoring game.
Their quarterback, Matthew Sluka, 168 quarterback rating, 61% completions, 1,449 yards, 17 touchdown passes, run for 987. And they got a big running back, Jordan Fuller, 1,040 yards, 6.8 yards a carry. And a big linebacker named Jacob Dubbs, fifth year, 111 tackles and 5 sacks. So they got some players, as Coach Munkin was saying today in the media conference. So we'll talk more about that on the Army Football Huddle. Between then and now, I've got to go interview some players and also Army coach, offensive coordinator Drew Thatcher. So, Jack, I want to thank you and compliment you for putting this together and for doing what you do following these conflicts around the world that the U.S. military is on guard to handle. So we will see you in a little bit. Anything else? Any final thought?
Nope. Looking forward to the huddle.
Okay, yeah, that'll be fun. So want to thank our key sponsor, the New York Yankees. They have a number of offers already out for the season. You can see that on their webpage. And also the Special Operations Warrior Foundation, taking care of children of fallen members of the Special Operations community, providing scholarships and mentoring, so valuable. So for Jack McGuirk, it's Ken Kraetzer for CaMMVets Media. We cover cadets, midshipmen, veterans, the military, proudly since 2008. Thanks for watching. Have a good day.